There is one specific thing that a true empowering leader is able to do. Are you in this elite group, or are you potentially a shadow ruler? My name is Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the fantasy mental health game Betwixt, which is where you can find all of my best and most creative tools for developing self-awareness and self-compassion. And this series of videos is devoted to the, in my opinion, fascinating world of archetypal character arcs. These are the archetypal journeys taken by characters so familiar to us from myth and tradition, religious teachings, and every other type of story, that they live within us as shared parts of the personality. Alive in what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious, archetypes influence every part of our world, from our self-image through to our life choices, our beliefs about what we can and cannot do, what we do and do not deserve. Here are my gender-neutral names for the 6 archetypal story arcs as they map onto the archetypal human life. The Sovereign's journey, which we're exploring in this video, is the path we take at life's metaphorical midpoint, or climax. And as such, if successfully completed, it will mark our transition from the temporal world of straightforward strength and success into the much more spiritual world of enlightenment and true wisdom, represented by the seer and mage arcs. All 6 of these archetypes bring with them 2 shadow archetypes. These are deeply destructive versions of the self that, if we're not careful, that is, if our eyes are not open, can reach up and drag us down into the darkness with them. How do we stop this from happening? By building our awareness. As Jung taught, if we resist or ignore an archetype, it will possess us. Not in its healthy form, but as its shadow. Bring that archetype into the light of conscious awareness, however, and it can serve as an empowering guide instead. This video then is here to help you awaken the sovereign within, and therefore guard against the threat of the inner puppet or tyrant. As explored in the previous video, the sovereign's story is one of self-sacrifice. Having reached the apex of life or whatever journey they're on, this leader, even though loved, respected and capable, faces a cataclysm, a threat so great, so different, that their usual methods simply cannot defeat it. Instead, this ruler has to offer themselves, as if some kind of ritual sacrifice, in propitiation to this otherworldly force. In real life, this represents the realization that we must all arrive at when something good has run its course, because nothing lasts forever. But when the thing that comes to an end is something that we have loved or something we have excelled in, then its ending can feel like a kind of death. And indeed it is. It's a psychological death. The cataclysm represents stagnation and the need for change. The sovereign's death represents their relinquishing of the status or power or success or happiness that a certain role or situation has afforded them. And their apparent demise afterwards represents the transition into the elder's realm of wisdom and almost magical intelligence and insight as a result. But we're not there yet. As sovereign, we will only reap the rewards of transcendent wisdom if we successfully master the ability to let go of this power or strength that our egos just love. If we fail this test, then we will not complete the sovereign's journey, but rather invite the sovereign's shadow sides forward. These are the puppet, a passive refusal to be a true servant leader, i.e. one who puts the needs of others before the needs of their own ego and therefore does a better job, or the tyrant, an aggressive refusal to be a servant leader. As you may have noticed while we've been exploring these story arcs, the real baddie in any one of these journeys, regardless of who or what the specified antagonist might be, is stagnation of growth. Anything that prevents our protagonist from leveling up to the next challenge and arcing out of their current archetype will invariably force them into a shadow role. In real life, we don't need to be making huge transitions literally all the time, but as a rule of thumb, I expect most of us would agree that it's usually better to choose the path of change and evolution over the path of dormancy and inertia, at least in the long term. This is because long periods of stagnation can make us feel powerless, and either leave us with unmet needs that we just don't believe we can satisfy, which is what we do at the passive end of the continuum, or force us to resort to less than optimal, destructive and manipulative methods of getting our needs met, which is what we do at the aggressive end of the continuum. For the sovereign, the passive shadow option is the puppet. This is a leader who is not powerful in and of themselves, they just wield power. They may have inherited their position of authority before really earning it. Or they may have earned it for real, but now find themselves too frozen by fear or insecurity to embody their authority fully because they struggle to believe in themselves as leaders. In these cases, the puppet is essentially imposter syndrome personified. Either way, the puppet archetype leaves a leader not only ineffective, but also manipulable by anyone else who might wish to use them to fulfill their own bad intentions. For examples of puppet sovereigns, think Joffrey and Tommen in Game of Thrones, or King Theoden in The Two Towers, who is possessed by the evil of Sauron and therefore literally controlled as if a human puppet. This character is also the perfect metaphor for dangerous stagnation. Theoden, with his grey, crumbling skin, is basically rotting. Perhaps worse than the puppet, though, a stagnating ruler could go the way of the tyrant. Simply unwilling to relinquish their power and status, the tyrant is a selfish ruler who uses their subjects as tools to meet their own needs. Think Michael Corleone in The Godfather, Scar in The Lion King, and Professor Umbridge in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. But, of course, the tyrant's refusal to self-sabotage will also be born of fear. The fear to let go of what was, and the fear of what will be on the other side. Remember that the sovereign arc is about passing over the apex of life's midpoint, and therefore finding ourselves staring down the road towards death. The sovereign is ripe for a midlife crisis, and the tyrant's refusal to let go can be seen as a fearful but understandable attempt to reject one's own mortality. Psychologically, it's not necessarily a literal death that the tyrant is trying to ward off, but a metaphorical one. To fall prey to this shadow archetype is to lose ourselves to the fear of change. To avoid the sovereign's shadow, then, is to befriend change, even, in fact, especially when it requires great sacrifice. It's hard to see it before the fact, but on the other side of any psychological death is rebirth and growth. The only way to come off worse after a sovereign's journey is to refuse to let go. So my question for you is this: are you holding on to something you need to let go of? And if so, what do you fear will happen if you do? Or try this. What is the material, or at least temporal, worldly thing that you are most afraid to relinquish in life? Is it money, respect, adulation? How about achievement or success? Because you may not need to do this right now. It's not necessarily the time yet. But in order to cross the threshold and become a great, wise seer, it is almost certainly that thing that you must be at least willing to give up. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And I really hope that you find this helpful. Finally, if you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth and wellness, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.